Hello, and welcome to the podcast of Two Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. My name is Chrissie Hodges.
And I'm Kat Atwell. Hi.
And we are your hosts, and we are here to use the topic of Two Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, obviously mocking the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, to break down stigma, to talk about everything mental health, to normalize what we have gone through in living with mental illness, and to help you feel less alone. Anything else, Kat?
No, just happy if this is the first time that you are watching our show. Very happy that you're here. If you're back again, equally happy that you're here. Really looking forward to today's talk. I had a cat hair in my mouth. That was a cat hair that landed on my face.
Today, our topic that we're going to be tackling and addressing is going to be advocacy. So as you can see, our show is completely advocacy driven. And we want to talk to you today about what it means to be an advocate, why you should be an advocate, how you become an advocate, what are some of the obstacles that you're going to face when you're an advocate, and we're going to use our lived experience to kind of drive that home for you. This is one of the biggest questions that I get from people. And actually, I do consulting on advocacy when you have a specific project you want, mainly to help you get on track, but also to give you a little, woohoo, I can do it, because it's pretty scary putting yourself out there. I mean, don't you think, Kat?
Yeah, when you get started and you're sharing your story, it's, you're making yourself about as emotionally naked as you can. Yeah. And recognizing, that part in your brain that's like, I'm totally helping people and that's why I'm doing this. So sometimes is a lot quieter than the part that's saying, oh my God, they are going to judge me and think that I have no qualifications and I'm wasting everybody's time. And Chrissie and I as advocates have learned to kick the crap out of those voices and allow the one to rise up that says you're really helping people by sharing your story. And it's true, because the more that we all talk about our lived experiences, the more people know that mental health is important and breaking down stigma is pivotal in moving forward.
So I think let's get right to it. Kat and I both are going to share our stories of how we became advocates and what it was that kicked our butts to get into that. And then Jody Gamble, who's a colleague, a friend of mine, and a kick-ass peer support specialist, is going to come on a little later to talk about what it takes to craft a recovery story, because that's one of the biggest things in getting started with advocacy. So Kat and I talked before. I'm going to go first. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into advocacy, and then Kat's going to come on and talk about it from her perspective. The great thing here is you're going to have three people who do three different things, who have strengths in three different parts of being an advocate. So you get kind of a full rounded look at what it means. So hopefully you're going to be able to grasp onto one of our stories and take some information from here and apply it to your advocacy. So I'll talk really quick. I'm going to note the time so I don't go over and just ramble on for an hour.
We never do that.
How I became a mental health advocate. I get this all the time. I'm going to tell you. It was 19 years ago. I was sitting on the steps of the psychology building at Georgia Southern University. I had just started therapy for OCD, which is what I have more so I have puro, which are violent, sexual, and blasphemous thoughts, and I have mental rituals. So I was in therapy, and all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, this therapy is working. I think I'm going to be okay. And I really did have this moment, and I remember looking up into the sky and being like, what if one day I can tell my story? What if I can tell people about all these horrible obsessions that I have? And OCD was like, no, you cannot. You see that light right there over my head? That's what it was like. It was like, no, Chrissie. It was like, nobody is going to believe you. Nobody is going to accept you. Everybody is going to judge you. Everybody's going to think that what you thought was real, and they're going to see you for the monster that you are. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this is a common thought, common fear with people who have mental illness and they're looking into being an advocate. All of those negative self-talk starts just taking over like white matter in your brain. And I adhered and I went, okay, I guess I'll never talk about it. Well, 14 years later, 14 years later. Is that right? Or is it just?
Yeah, there. That's the one.
14 years later, I had struggled and suffered in silence. I was miserable. I was saturated with personal stigma for years, thinking I should be ashamed and I should feel guilty and, oh, I'm such a horrible person. Then I relapsed. Not so much the icing on the cake that you would want. However, it kicked my ass into advocacy gear. I got to a point where I was like, I am so sick of this. Like, who cares if people know about what I'm dealing with? Because I'm going to tell you, living in silence is worse than saying what you feel and everybody judging you. That's how I got to it. So this is what I did. I actually had 3 weeks until my medication was going to kick in. And so I thought, I've still got to work. I owned a clothing store at the time. What am I going to do? So I opened up my computer and I started. At age 8, my symptoms showed up and I started writing the story of my life. I got halfway through that damn story and I was like, this is pretty interesting. First of all, I was like, is this really my life? Did this really happen? Because I had blocked out a lot of it. And then I thought, I think this is something that people could get, they could feel not so alone if they knew. And so my wheels started turning. That negative self-talk back here was like, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, you're going to embarrass yourself. You know, I grew up in the South, so there was all this, you know, don't want the neighbors to know what you feel and all that BS. And so that's what kept me silent until I decided I'm going to go learn how to speak. Because if I know how to speak, I can use that to my advantage on these difficult topics. So I went to Toastmasters. I signed up to Cherry Creek Toastmasters. That was the commitment to the change. That was the commitment to do something to forward my recovery. Let me tell you something. I mean, it almost took a cocktail at 5 a.m. to get me there.
I believe it.
I was so scared. You know, it was at 7 a.m. I didn't know all these damn people. I walk in, you know, I had big hair then. It was big and curly. I walk in.
Wow.
It was huge. I walk in, I sit down, and I thought, this is the path. So for the next 6 months, I learned how to speak. And in Toastmasters, you get to do speeches and you get critique from people. And it wasn't until speech number 5 or 6 where I brought OCD into the mix. And I'm telling you, I was terrified because I thought, all these people are going to know this is the first time I'd ever spoken out loud about it, except for to very, very, very close friends. And afterwards, I think they all gave me good ratings because they felt sorry for me. But they all came up to me and it was this empowering moment of thank you for sharing. My, you know, brother suffers from depression. My mother this, my father this. And I was like, oh my God, I was hooked. I was hooked. It was now, you know, selfishly, I'm like, now I don't feel so alone. And that's when I like the bug stuck and I thought, okay, I'm going to start speaking and I don't know who I'm going to do it to or where or whatever. I just put it out there and I went and talked to Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs. I'm going to tell you, I went to some places, there were people at 90 years old and they're all like, this girl. Cause I'm like, well, you know, it would be like me getting a fork and stabbing you in the arm while I'm talking to you. And they're like, I hope she's not eating next to me. So I just learned the craft of speaking. And as I went along, I put pieces of my story I felt comfortable with. The more I spoke about it, the more I could talk about it because the more confident I got, not only in my story, but my speaking ability. The more confident I got in the questions I was going to get, and I was becoming the expert in my own story. And when you're the expert in your own story, you cannot fail. And that's when things like I have 2 minutes. That's when things like the podcast started. I had a woman bring me on one of her podcasts, and I love telling the story over like a radio setup. She had a microphone and everything. I was like, oh my God, I can do this. She talked to me. She was like, start your own podcast. So I started bringing on all these people with mental illness. I learned so much about my own stigmas. I learned so much that I was scared of people with schizophrenia until I started talking to people with it. And then I was like, oh my God, everything I knew was a lie. And so that's when I just got the bug. And I started blogging, and I just started branding myself as I am an advocate. I am someone that's going to speak out about OCD. And here it is, 4 years later, 5 years later, and I have had the privilege to talk to people across the globe about OCD. Why? Because it's not because I'm anything special. I'm going to tell you that. It's because I just took the risk of thinking I needed someone in my darkest hour to tell me that I was not alone. I didn't get it. So I want to be that person in someone's darkest hour so they can turn on a video and they can go, if she did it, I can do it.
Right.
That's my whole point in advocacy. That's why I'm here. That's why I love doing it. It is self-serving because I love knowing I'm not alone. But it is also so much about helping people when they were at a place that I was when I was 21 years old. And I looked up at the sky on the psychology building when I'm sitting on the steps, and OCD said, you'll never speak about this in public. I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. And you will save so many people a lot of heartache. That is my story. I finished on time. Yes.
I feel like I need to run in there and high five you. By the way, right? Behold the power of the internet. I want you to toot your own horn too about the new job that you have, doing the live webcast.
Yay! I'm so nervous and excited at the same time. I was asked by Mental Health on the Mighty, which if you don't know about it, please go look it up. Google Mental Health on the Mighty. They have great articles, great live videos, anything mental health. It will make you feel filled up with love and support. Anyway, Mental Health on the Mighty asked me to be a monthly live video contributor for them. And I am so honored. I can't believe, I hope I don't let them down. To me, this will put Pure OCD global. People will be able to see my videos every month and know the topics that are about Pure O. And I am just, I'm so overwhelmed and humbled. So thank you for that, Kat.
You're welcome. I love seeing you progress in your advocacy. And this is kind of the reason that we're talking about this today, because the louder you get and the more comfortable you are and the more passionate you are, the sky is the limit, really. So as far as my story is concerned, it's different, shockingly enough.
That's the contrast.
So in my case, I grew up in I was very theatrical, and I continue to be, and about 16, almost 17 years ago, I'd already been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, but I hadn't really taken all that too seriously. But I realized that doing improv comedy really helped me with my anxiety, because for those of you that are unfamiliar with improv, it's like whose line is it anyway stuff, where you go on stage and people yell suggestions at you and you make stuff up on the spot, nothing memorized.
Basically everything anxiety producing.
We're going to have to do a whole episode on stigma and how extroverted people can still have anxiety. Anyway, so it helped me. And I was like, okay, aside from the fact that I'm hilarious, it's also self-serving because it's making me really focus mindfully on what I'm doing. And so I continued doing that. And when I moved to Denver from Kansas City, within 6 months, I was hospitalized. Another talk for another day. And that's when I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so I felt really broken during that period of time. And I I think I went about 6 years of just kind of cruising along, not really talking about it, but not talking about it. Before I started advocating through fundraising walks. Actually, you know what? It's when I lost my friend Chris to suicide.
Okay.
That I really felt I needed to start talking more, because it was his inability to ask for help that I think, cut a life way too short. And realizing that I do have a voice that I certainly don't mind sharing with anyone and everyone who will listen. I started doing these walks, and when I started walking with NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, here in Colorado, one of the volunteers started talking to me about the In Our Own Voice program and was like, you really should do this. You're a very dynamic speaker. And so I actually started through In Our Own Voice, which is a great free program. And if you look up NAMI, I think it's NAMI.org or NAMIColorado.org, you can learn more about it. And it's where people, go wherever the community dictates they go to share their personal stories of their mental health journeys. And I've done a lot of speaking at inpatient behavioral units, retirement communities, churches, police departments, college classes, and it's the same deal. Wherever people want me, I will be there, because it is so, I don't know how to describe it, Chrissy. It's like, when the light shines, it's like, this is why I do this. When somebody looks at you with that raw vulnerability of, I thought I was alone, and you just showed me that I'm not. That is such a magical experience. And helping someone take that shame wall down to, it's not just you. And it is. The more you tell your story, the less power it holds over you.
Absolutely.
Again, I may not be speaking for everyone here, but as an advocate, I know it certainly does. The less shame I have, the more I speak about it, because on my end, I have people doing that. Oh my gosh, same thing. Or my mom or my sister or my brother. Knowing I'm helping people and knowing that each time I tell it, the level of shame that I have that's associated with what I go through reduces a little bit. I will also say that I put off doing it for a while because I was of the mindset that if I tried hard enough, I could get over mental illness. And so that's what happened with me. And now I'm here, and I got involved in the podcast and the blog, and This Is My Brave and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah.
So before we bring Jody on, hey, Jody.
Hello.
Kat, talk really quickly about your involvement in these huge productions. So, you've got This Is My Brave under your belt, and then Ignite. And you've been, I know Ignite isn't about mental health, but you've been.
I did it. Okay, so Ignite. I kind of do guerrilla advocacy. So
writing that down.
So I love getting the opportunity to get on stage in front of people that are not there specifically to learn about mental health, because I think all too often there are just scads of people who don't know that they need these stories. Ignite Denver is one of the platforms that I use, ignitedenver.org, but there are Ignites all over the world, actually. It's kind of like TED Talks-ish. Look it up if you're interested. And then last week I did a show with the Narrators, which is a live show and a podcast. And again, I got to talk about my living with mental illness, a story about overindulgence. And it's like, bam, we're going to talk about mania. And so, I like sneaking up on people that way and opening people's eyes. And the networking that you get to do with people is just, it's just amazing. So.
Excellent. Well, okay. I'm gonna like something you just said just jogged my mind, and I'm gonna have Jody start off on it. And he doesn't know what that topic's gonna be, so I bet he's gonna be like. But But before that, I want to ask the viewers who are going to be looking at this, if you like what you see, if you like our content, if this is something you want to support, you've always wanted to support mental health, but you don't know how to do it, head over to our Patreon site, patreon.com/2flewoverthecuckoo's-nest. It's here that you can pledge $1 per show. We do about 2 shows per month. Or anything up above that. And what it does is this is a listener supported show. It keeps us on the air. It keeps us going. And we have lots of goals we're going to meet. If we reach $500 a show, we're going to sponsor someone to go to their nearest NAMI conference. That's going to include hotel, and that's going to include the conference. So this is what we want to do. We want to help people. We have lots of other incentives, including your own, like our own dialogue that you get to see and nobody else gets to see. So please head on over there, pledge $1 a show or more, and contribute to helping us get the word out about breaking down the stigma of mental illness. Now, I'm going to bring on one of my favorite people in the entire world, which you probably already know if you've been following our show, Jody Gamble. Woo! Peer support specialist extraordinaire, taught me everything I know. And Jody, I'm going to have you kick us off with a topic that I did not know we were going to talk about, but now I'm going to take us in this direction. Jody, Kat was just talking about how she springs her story on people at random places, you know, and all of a sudden, all these people out there are like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. You and I have had many discussions about people like us, normal everyday people who live or trying to live relatively normal lives that are saturated in this stigma, hiding their stories in shame, not wanting anyone else to know. Maybe they let their family know, and maybe, you know, their immediate family, but they don't want anyone else to know. Talk about the importance of normalizing. What's the importance of people listening to and watching us and seeing what we have to say when it comes to their own recovery?
I think that normalizing comes with the first and foremost, you need to become comfortable telling your own story. And I come from the corporate world, and in the corporate world, it's called an elevator speech. So 5-minute speech that kind of you really power it. You know, that whenever I first started telling my story, you know, there was kind of part 1, which was like cupcakes and rainbows, successful living. And, you know, then there was part 2, which was the diagnosis and life post-diagnosis. And, you know, the first time that I told my story at the drop-in center I used to work at, you know, there were people that were just kind of falling asleep when I told the successful or the cupcakes and rainbows part of the story. But then when I got into the meat of the story and started telling about all of the struggles I had,
the dirty
details, like the dirty details, like that's what people connected with. And that's kind of been a learning lesson. Like, you know, I've used to be this person, oh, you got to be positive. Oh, you got to, you know, put your best face forward. But when you're vulnerable, I can't say this enough, when you're vulnerable with your story, that's when people perk up and they go, you know, I can connect to that. I can relate to what you're saying. And it's powerful.
So Jody, we're going to have Jody talk a little bit about what it is like to craft a recovery story. But first, I'd like to pose the question to Kat and myself about the importance of normalizing this experience to other. Jody, thank you. That was lovely. You're saying expose the dirty details. Kat, what do you think?
I think normalizing is really important. As someone that still works in the corporate world, it is really difficult. Well, used to be, not so much as it used to be for me, to be able to say, yeah, I have a mental illness in the workplace, and that for me, normalizing it is, you know, I mean, it's similar to anybody else having any kind of physical illness that you can see. I don't like feeling like somehow I've lost credibility by outing myself, however you want to put it, for something that 1 in 4 Americans live with on a daily basis. And not only that, but I'll also say I think normalizing is important too for kids, to be an example for our kids, and so that they know if they're struggling. If I had been able to start working with tools to treat my depression and anxiety way before I did, oh man, I would have been so grateful. I think communication is really important, and getting it into schools is also really important. So I might have gone off track, Chrissy, but shocker, that never happens.
Well,
that is just perfect timing, Kat, with what you just said, because today I'm gonna create a 6-year-old version of my recovery story to share with my son. And it's so timely that you said that. So I'm like, how do I, create a 6-year-old version of my recovery story?
I love it.
That's awesome.
We should have a whole show on that, Jody.
Yeah, hey, I'll share it if I write it today. You giving me a deadline, next show.
Awesome. My thing about normalizing, and so I'll just keep going on the theme of, how do we talk to kids about it, or how do we talk to people about it? My whole thing, and both of you know this, and anybody that knows my advocacy knows there are no holds bar with me. I don't care what I say. I don't care how much I make people uncomfortable. Like, my story in general makes people uncomfortable. So,
Chrissy, you just make people uncomfortable with or without your story.
I think when I'm like giving a speech, like to the Denver Sheriff's Department, the police department that I do every month, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, if I had a sexual obsession about this person, I'd look over and think, oh my God, I just looked at their penis. And everyone's just like, is this really what we're dealing with now?
Yes, that is exactly what you're having to deal with.
So my normalizing has turned into making all of these terminologies normal life topics: suicide, mental illness. There's a whole movement out there saying we don't need to talk about mental illness. Do you know what this one says? I don't care. I'm going to say it. I'm going to identify as someone with a mental illness. You know why? Because I want people to know it is okay that that's what you have. If I shout it to the ends of the earth, people just know, well, she doesn't care if she has a mental illness. Why should I care? She had a suicide attempt. Why should I care? I mean, that way people don't have to be ashamed to say it out loud. Have you ever noticed anyone that talks about suicide? This is what they do. They'll be like, well, my so-and-so, they attempted suicide. And they'll drop their head. They'll put their hand up. They'll lower their voice. I guess they don't want God to hear it or something. I don't know.
Oh, no.
But to me, normalize it. This is suicide. It's one of the #1 killers in the world. Why aren't we talking about it? Why can't we say it out loud without saying shame? So that is my contribution to the normalizing piece. I go to a little bit of an extreme, but you know what? I'm going to reach people because of it, and I don't care. Although I don't care if I'm PC either. So I don't know, whatever. I talk about sexual obsessions. There's no holds bar after that. Like, once you broach that subject, you're done. You can talk about anything. So anyway, okay. End of that rant. Jody, tell us about crafting your story. Now, let me give you a little bit of a preface to Jody's talk. So Jody, Kat and I both talked about how we got into our advocacy, about 10 minutes worth. And then Jody, when I first started working with him, he seriously read his recovery story off of the page. And in the 1.5 years that we've worked together, he finally last month told his recovery story, no notes, no note cards, no nothing. And it was phenomenal. It was emotional. It was engaging. Everybody loved it. It was passionate. So tell us, Jody, how to craft that story and how people can get to the point where you were to where you are now, which is, bitches, I'm gonna own this.
Oh, what I'll tell you, the way I'll start it off is like, there's a difference between an author and a storyteller. And, whenever I first started telling my recovery story, it was from an author standpoint because, first a little bit about how I crafted it. Like I came across my writing process the first time that I crafted my recovery story. So I would lay out note cards, like 6 or 7 note cards. And, I have a scattered brain and, my thoughts run really fast and they're not connected in a linear fashion. So, one thought would be on this note card and then another thought would be on another post. And like what ended up happening is it was like visual on my table, like after, every note card was full. And then like visually looking at it on the table, it's like, okay, this here, this on this note card, this note card over here, that sentence goes next. And, I authored my recovery story. And then once I had it on paper, like I had this struggle, like I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to leave out anything. So I'm just going to read it word for word. Then I came across Chrissie Hodges, who told her story. And I saw that, after about the third story of hers, like it's different every time. Like she drives the main, but, she tailors it for the audience. And so now, the other day when I told it for the first time without note cards, and like I was just sitting in front of a very receptive audience, like, instead of the author reading the script, I became the storyteller telling the story. And, it's like a comedian that gets a feel for the audience and gets a rhythm with the audience. Like what I've learned to do now is like, take a look at the visual cues of the people that I'm telling my story to and go, okay, I need to draw this out a little bit. And then I need to gloss over this part because, they're kind of glazing over now. And like, you get it's like a dance between the audience and your story. That's kind of where I've learned this is the point I've come to in my telling of my recovery story is just, make it, connect with your audience. That's what a good storyteller does.
Yeah.
Jody sorry, go ahead, Kat.
No, I was gonna say, I think reading your audience is a wonderful tool to allow to grow, because Jody's dead on. When you see people glazing over, it's like, well, in order to really connect with them, I need to move on to something else. And there is, and every audience is going to be different, be it, one person or 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
Jody, I've watched the progression that you've had in your confidence of public speaking, not only public speaking, but also going from just telling your story in maybe a little bit more of a timid fashion to a year and a half later being able to take pride in the experience that you had and becoming the man that you are today. So talk about, if you could, for a few minutes, what has that process looked like as you kind of like the fear at first of, oh my God, they're going to know like all these details of my life and a suicide attempt and all this, to now where that shame when you tell your story is completely gone and you use it to your advantage?
Well, I think it's just one of the basic human instincts that that we have a fear of rejection.
Yes.
You know, that's what, you know, was a huge obstacle in my own life with telling my story, is like, you know, I'm gonna tell this story and people are gonna think that, you know, I'm an animal, I'm somebody that doesn't deserve to be listened to, you know, and just the rejection of that person. So, you know, what I found out was the complete opposite. Like, you know, and this is what I strive to do every time, is to get a me too out of that person or audience. And, you know, that's huge for me. And then for me, repetition is the mother of learning. Like, the more I tell my story, the more comfortable telling my story. And so that's really my biggest piece of advice for people that are are new to sharing their story, is tell it to everybody you come into contact with. I mean, and you know, every time you tell it, you're going to get better and better and better and more comfortable telling that story. And what you're going to find is that people don't reject you.
Yes.
Or at least the right people won't reject you. And kind of look at it as, you know, almost like a wonderful filter. Like, let it, you know, when it feels comfortable. You want to do it when it feels comfortable. But, you know, the people that stick with you and identify with you and want to hear more about your life, like, it kind of filters people out that you want or don't want in your life. Like, you know, somebody that's glued to your story, like, God, I want to keep you in my life. I want to keep you, I want you to get to know me, and I want to get to know you. And, you spark that, okay, well, you just told me this. And because you told me this, I'm going to tell you this. And, you know, the nature of a recovery story is, if they do tell you a story back, you know, it's going to be a story where they're vulnerable too, more times than not. And, you know, that can open you up to getting to know some people that you wouldn't otherwise have known.
Right.
In a deeper way. I mean, recovery stories are deep. I mean, really deep. And, you know, for somebody to tell you their version of a recovery story back, even if it's not with mental illness, it's just like, you know, this is what I've gone through in my life, and this is what I'm dealing with. Like, give me those kind of conversations any day over, well, what's the weather like today? Oh, it was good. You know, that's, you can, don't waste my time with stuff like that.
How's the weather over there, Jody?
Oh, it's sunny. I want to fly over the cuckoo's nest, but the weather's just too bad.
That's perfect. You know, I want to add something real quick too to what you said, Jody. You used the word rejection, which, you know, set off a light in my head. One of the things that I've had to learn through speaking with people is that you aren't always going to change the trajectory of someone's life. And sometimes people aren't going to connect to you, and you can't allow one experience like that to slow your momentum, because that's going to happen occasionally, and that's okay. So keep that in mind too when you are sharing your story.
Any sort of talk about mental illness can plant seeds. You know, this is one of the things I've learned in the years and years and years that I've been talking about my recovery story is, you think people aren't listening? I'm going to tell you, if you're going to start your advocacy on social media, just be prepared. People ain't going to like your shit. They're not. You're not going to get likes. You're not going to get comments, and you're going to go, why am I even doing this? No one cares. People are watching, and a lot of people, unfortunately, aren't going to want to click like, or they're not going to comment because they don't necessarily want to be associated with mental health stigma, and that's okay. But just know, the one person that may need it the most will see it, they'll read it, and you will make their day, and sometimes their whole week. And you'll be surprised, people will reach out to you out of the blue that you're like, I didn't even know I was friends on you with Facebook, and all of a sudden now you're loving the blog, and thank goodness. So mental health advocacy on social media, not the easiest avenue, right?
Right. Well, and as you mentioned, right when you and I met, stand-up comedy, amateur nights, also a difficult way to break it.
Yes. We should have Sean David come on and talk about that too.
Right.
So before we get into, I'm hoping we can end the show with, some advice on what to do from each of us if you're wanting to start telling your recovery story, if you have an idea for advocacy. But before we get into that, Kat brought up a big topic. We have about 15 minutes, but that I would love to talk about, and I'm gonna let you kick it off, Kat, because you have a different take than I was describing earlier. Competitive advocacy.
Right, competitive advocacy. And I love Chrissie because she's coming at it from a not selfish standpoint, and mine is all selfish standpoint. So I have found in sharing my story, and this is sort of an ongoing thing. I've always been a competitive person. I like winning. And with advocacy, you're aiming towards a common goal. You aren't trying to beat anyone in advocating better. And so I struggle sometimes when I see other people who are speaking to mental health and who are making a lot of progress, and I am not running in lockstep with them. It's hard for me to just keep going. And I realize that I'm about to apologize for stuff. That's kind of who I am, as far as I grew up in a very competitive environment and a success, and you had to get the A's and financial motivation. And so if I'm not at the same level as somebody else who I really respect who's doing advocacy, sometimes that can actually take me back a few notches and slow me down. And so I came at the whole competitive piece of don't let other people's stories slow your own momentum, and recognize that your uniqueness, that your snowflake is still valid. And even though your trajectory might be a lot slower or a lot faster, not to give up, and to always ask for help from friends, especially fellow advocates, because they certainly can.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this is what could be a good, I think what could be a good topic for a later show would be the different pathways to advocacy, which I think we all encompass, like different paces, different things that we would do. I mean, Kat, I would never get up and do freaking improv. Are you kidding me? Ever. And so it's more along the lines of, some people go into advocacy and that's their whole life. That's what they're going to do, and that's what their goal is. And it's kind of like someone who, I'm going to go into being in the medical field, and then all of a sudden it becomes their whole life. Any advocacy helps, I think. That, I mean, in my opinion, it's. But I get what you're saying. I remember when I first started, one of the reasons why I started becoming an advocate was I saw the OCD website, and I saw Jeff Bell, and I saw what's her name? Elizabeth McInvale. And I remember thinking, I want to be just like them. They were like huge advocates for OCD. And I thought, how are they so good at what they do? But like, I've met them in person, and they're just human beings like I am. And they just took that risk of telling their story. And they have been like this driving force. Like, I look up to people who do advocacy, and I hope I can be more like them. Not like them as individuals, but like, what are they doing? How can I be part of that? Or how can I, use that in my own advocacy? And I hope people feel that way, with the stuff that I lay out there too. I mean, in the long run, I hope that fucking people just get help, But I feel that way too, I think, because I think to myself,
I think that's good to the end of your recovery speech. I think you should I hope people get fucking help.
Mic drop. And
Mic drop. Jody, what do you think?
Well, I want to make sure, like, we're talking about competitive advocacy, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I was a wrestler growing up, and so I was competitive, and that you've won when you hold somebody's back 3 seconds on. So you've won the match. With advocacy, it's hard to know. You can get applause from an audience or a me too from an individual, but it's hard to say, okay, I've won or I've done, my job. Like it's hard to know that. And the biggest thing is in your own journey of advocacy, you set it pace. If I think that I'm going to give I have a dream speech like Martin Luther King tomorrow, that's not going to happen. So what you need to do is focus on your own pace and advocate at your pace. And, there's always going to be somebody better than you, and there's always going to be somebody that's not as good as you. But developing that comfort zone with your own pace in advocacy is huge. And, back to wrestling, I had a coach that he said, you may have to slow down, you may have to stop for a break, but the one thing, if you're going to do this, you don't quit. And I think once you make that decision, like, I'm going to be an advocate, and no matter what, I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
If you go with that mentality, I think that's your best chance of becoming a winning advocate.
Yeah. And you know what? Every time you talk, I'm like, he brought up something really cool.
I'm taking notes.
Good. That one of the things for me as well is when I get to a point where my mind is spinning and I am playing the comparison game, I realize that my focus has gone away from advocacy and that it's time to recenter and reprioritize on why I'm doing what I do.
Well, before we give you a little preview of an advocacy show that we're going to be having coming up that kind of addresses this topic, or will help ease people's minds when it comes to this topic, I want us all to comment on what it means to start an advocacy project, to be an advocate, and what people can expect. And if you want to throw in obstacles, we have about 9 minutes. I'll just kick it off really quick, and then I'll kind of wrap around and talk about our next show that deals with advocacy. Kind of like to go off of what Kat just said. The thing is that I had the privilege and the honor, Jody was there too, to get to see Kevin Hines speak a couple weeks ago. Love that guy. His whole focus is suicide prevention. This is what he does. This is what he hones in on. This is what his book is about. He definitely talks about living with bipolar disorder, but this is who he reaches. And I think in advocacy, when you narrow down that focus, what is it that you want people to know? I'm just about to have a book come out and be published, and people are like, well, who do you really want to reach? And don't you want everyone to read? And don't you want everyone to see this? And I had to really think in my head, what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? I'm doing it for the people that are like my experience. Because money or not, who gives a shit? It only matters the people that it's going to reach in the long run. So find that thing. You can change it too. I'm not saying like find the thing and 10 years down the road you can't change it. Find the thing that you're passionate about. Find how your strengths support that passion. Are you a good speaker? Can you do improv? Can you do comedy? Are you a good writer? Are you a good artist? What is it that you do that's going to reach people for your passion, and start doing it? I'm giving you permission right now. Start doing it today. Don't start tomorrow. Don't start, I'll do it when I'm not so busy at work. Start today. Whatever it is, make a plan. Make a commitment. follow through with the commitment, because I'm telling you, advocacy for you starts the moment that you start, not the moment you think it takes off. I've been doing this for 5 years. I feel like it really has only took off in the last 6 months. So, you know, it doesn't matter. Anyone along the way you can reach, the minute you make someone feel less alone is the minute you become an advocate.
I've totally forgotten what the question was. Yep.
Oh, the question is that, you know, if someone's contemplating being an advocate, like what is it that they can do? Like, how do they get motivated, and what are maybe some obstacles? Yeah.
Okay. So obstacles, fear of rejection, which I think has already been brought up. And to just be willing to set that aside. Have a core group of friends that you trust. Seek out other advocates.
Yes.
Because they will lift you up. I've made, you know, it's weird. Chrissie and I met roughly 6 months ago, and just knowing her, it has lit a fire under my ass, quite frankly, because I feed off of her energy. And thank you, Chrissie. I'm acting like you're not here. And it does, you want to do more. It's very much like, you know, we have all kinds of nonprofits for mental health, but a lot of times they aren't sharing information, and we forget that we're working towards a common cause. I personally love the fact that, you know, I do it through theater, and that getting on stage and helping people get on stage for me really, really feeds my passion in that regard. Yeah, I guess, you know, it's kind of like Mr. Rogers, look for the kind people. Because they do. If you find folks, be willing to ask for help, be willing to learn and to listen. And you know, and even if you can just find out, hey, I'm not ready to share my story, but I want to help. Trust me, there are always going to be places where you can get your foot in the door while you're working up the courage to share your story.
Excellent. What do you think, Jody?
You know, I think, you know, the advice I would give is, first you have to decide, like, that's probably the hardest part is, you know, deciding, okay, this is my life path. And then once you've made the decision, I want to be an advocate, you know, you have to give some thought to it. Like, you know, I consider myself, I just coined this myself and I'm going to patent it, I'm a micro advocate. So, you know, if I'm at a state hospital and I help someone, I advocate with someone to get off a certain status, or if I advocate for somebody to get off a med that they're having a negative side effect with, you know, that's right now, that's where my bread and butter with advocacy is. It's like micro advocacy. And then, you know, you kind of taught me this, Chrissie, is like opening yourself up to the universe and be willing to take on what the universe sends you. Like, you know, with telling my recovery story, you know, when I wrote it, I was like, okay, I'm going to take this 1 week course on writing it. I'm going to tell it in this class, and that'll be that. But then the universe had something else in store. You know, I won't go into all the places, but like probably the most nerve-wracking and amazing place that I told my recovery story was to a group of social workers, or a social work graduate program at a prestigious university here in Denver. And you know, I was shaking in my boots. My mouth was dry, but like, and asked me one time, you know, are you brave? And I said yes. So now I got to live up to that. And you know, it's at times it's going to be scary what the universe puts in your path with your advocacy. But you know, the more you do it, and you know, you may stumble. Like, you know, it wasn't my best version of my recovery story with the graduate program, but you know what? It's probably, you know, the thing that has given me the most confidence to tell it in front of anybody. Like, you know, if I feel like, you know, if I was invited to, you know, probably if I was invited to the Queen in England to tell my recovery story, like I would still be nervous, but I would do it. No question asked.
I would need like a shot or a glass of wine beforehand. Me too. Yeah.
Mule.
Yeah, I think a few would be in order there.
Well, this has been an awesome discussion, y'all. I'm so glad that we did this. I think that this is a huge topic, and I think there's a lot of questions unanswered, but that's what this show is here for. So if any of the viewers, if you're watching this and you have more questions, send it our way, and we could maybe come back on and address some of the things that you're looking to hear. Again, I wanted to stress, if you're looking to get into, you know, wanting to support mental health, advocacy, and stigma reduction, please consider supporting the show so we can keep getting the word out, so we can keep doing this and doing the topics that need to be heard, frankly, and that are buried most of the time under all the bullshit surrounding mental health. So go to patreon.com/2flewoverthecuckoosnest. Kat, why don't you take us out today? Oh shit, you want to tell people about what the show is, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, I can do it.
You do it.
We're going to have a show coming up very soon surrounding advocacy guilt.
Yes.
which I'm really excited about as well. Where we're going to talk about when life gets a little overwhelming and you start feeling bad about not being able to save everyone, help everyone, do everything.
Yes, that's a big one. It'll tie in a lot with self-care, which is something else we wanted to talk about today, but as usually when we all get together, it flies by. Jody, any final words?
You know, basically what I would end with in my part of the show is, you know, don't be afraid. The world needs advocates in a major way, especially with mental health. Like, you know, there are so many people out there demonizing people with mental illness, and you know the media is no different. And you know, to be that glimmer of hope in somebody's life that has bought into that trash, that makes all the difference in the world. You can actually change somebody's life and make their life better. And you know, to me that's the meaning of life, is to help people, and that's ultimately what an advocate does, is they help people. And I don't know of a bigger cause to take on than that.
Excellent. I agree. Thank you so much for being here today. Yes, we love having you. I appreciate your viewership. Please spread the word. We need as many people to stand up now as possible to tell their lived experience. In this day and age, there's nothing more powerful than the lived experience. Kat, thank you. Jody, thank you. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Y'all are my people. What can I say? This will be posted on our Facebook page, Two Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like it if you haven't gotten a chance. We'll see you in a couple weeks. We don't know if the advocacy guilt's going to be next time, but it will be something interesting. So stay tuned. And you have been listening to Two Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where we're changing lives one story at a time. Bye.
Bye.